Bitcoin just broke bullish above a 10-year trend. Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, I have to show you a trend that has been in place on Bitcoin since 2011, back when Bitcoin was trading at $32. This trend line has played a role in the massive expansion of Bitcoin's price ever since the beginning of the last decade, and today, Bitcoin is breaking above this trend line in a very important way. I am going to show you what this means based on the historical analysis, because the last time that Bitcoin broke bullish above this level in this way, it rallied 600% within the span of 12 months. I'm going to show you exactly where Bitcoin might be going over the next 12 months as a result of this trend line. If you enjoyed today's video, hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But without much further ado, guys, let's go ahead and dive right on into it. Today's video is brought to you by the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy. If you want to know how to do all of the technical analysis that we're about to do, make sure to sign up with the link in the description box down below and check out our Google reviews. We've got 67 of them, and they are all very, very positive. All right, guys, we are going to start on something called the Brave New Coin Liquid Index for Bitcoin. What this is a chart that helps to show us what Bitcoin has done over its entire history. If you were looking at a chart of Coinbase or Bitfinex or Bybit, then you're only looking at a certain amount of history for as long back as that exchange has been active. But there are no exchanges right now that are popular that were active back when Bitcoin was trading below $1. But the Brave New Coin Liquid Index for Bitcoin actually compiles all of Bitcoin's pricing data to give us an entire history of Bitcoin's price going all the way back to 2010 in July when Bitcoin was trading at 8 cents. This is a very useful chart because it helps us to understand the long-term trends of Bitcoin. We are talking about one trend line today. It is this one, and as you can see, it perfectly intersects this entire trend, the entire history of Bitcoin, this entire market. I'm going to go through and show you how Bitcoin has played through this trend line, and then I'm going to show you what this trend line is telling us about the next 12 months on Bitcoin. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Looking back to June of 2011, we find something called the pivot point of a trend line. Now, when you have a trend line, you have a point, and then the point could either go this way, or this way, or this way, depending on how the pivot point works. In our case, we saw that the pivot point pointed this direction, and that's where the trend line goes, and we'll see why in a second. The pivot point on this trend line was set on June the 3rd of 2011 on Bitcoin when it was trading at $29. Wouldn't it be nice to buy some Bitcoin at $29? If we zoom forward here into 2013, a full 2 years later, we already see that we are intersecting this trend line in a major way and trading around it, ranging around this trend line. So we already see that it is becoming an important trend line in early to mid 2013. Moving forward here to late 2014, early on in 2015, we use this level as support a multitude of times. We come down and test it once at $282 on the 1st of October 2014. Then we test the zone again at $300, and then we use it as support before breaking below it here in January of 2015. Moving forward, though, we can see that we sit below this trend line for almost 2 years, and we don't break back up above it until we get to May of 2017. We use this resistance zone a couple of times here in December of 2016 and March of 2017, but then we finally break above it in May of 2017, pulling back to test it as support in July of 2017. Moving forward, however, we can see the next couple of times that Bitcoin tested this level was when we fell below it here in November of 2018, and then we rallied above it here in May of 2019. Notice in this case, Bitcoin only spent 176 days below this level instead of almost 2 years as it did prior. Moving forward then, we can see that Bitcoin briefly fell below this level before briefly getting back up above it and then falling below it again. Now, something very interesting happened here that we're going to talk about here in just a second. The reason that this area of the market is important will come up in a second, but let's finish looking at the historicity of this trend. We can also see that we use this resistance level as this resistance zone as a rejection here around Valentine's Day of 2020. From there, Bitcoin would fall, but this was not as a result of this trend line. This was actually as a result of the flu that happened in early 2020. We would have likely seen Bitcoin rally back up above this trend line immediately if it were not for the events that unfolded in early 2020. So if that were to take place, then Bitcoin would have only stayed below this trend line for 100 days. Instead, it ended up staying below it for much longer as a result of fundamentals, not as a result of technicals. Moving forward here, we can also see we use this as resistance at $20,000 in December of 2020 when we eventually broke through it and stayed above it. We also use this level as support here in July of 2021, and then we get to where we are today. Bitcoin used this trend line as support briefly here in January, fell below it, and then just like we saw back in 2019, Bitcoin fell below this trend line for the span of about 3 to 4 weeks and then broke up above that trend line. In fact, this is only the second time in history that we've fallen below this trend line where we didn't stay below it for a multitude of months or years. And right now, we're currently testing it as support. So there's two things I want to show you here. Number one, if we stay above this trend line and use it as support, not only are we going to be forming an inverse head and shoulders pattern, which will likely lead us back to all-time high, it also shows in the history that anytime you get above and stay above this trend line, you go on a massive rally. For example, back in 2013, we saw that when Bitcoin got above this trend line, we rallied 820%. Here in May of 2017, we rallied 1,000%. Here in May of 2019, we rallied 100%. And here in 2020, December of 2020, we rallied 250%. Getting above this trend line indicates that we should be about to go into another major uptrend, but even if we don't, take a look at what happened before. We saw that Bitcoin briefly rallied above this, fell back below it. So if we do briefly rally above this trend line, as we did in November of 2019, what might happen? Bitcoin might stay below this trend line for 90 days, as it did in late 2019, early 2020, and then bounce and rally and go on a massive tear. So the point I'm making here is that Bitcoin getting above this trend line is very bullish and could, in and of itself, lead to a multiple 100% rally. And if we do fall below it, we may pull back down into the mid-30s, as we've talked about before, but we would be unlikely to stay down there long because historically, Bitcoin has a trend of staying above this trend line more recently than it has in the past. Just remember to what I said earlier. We stayed below this trend line for almost 3 years back between 2014 and 2017. Then we barely only stayed below it for about 6 months, and then we really only stayed below it for 90 days. The only reason we stayed below this trend line for longer was because of fundamental developments. Bitcoin has a tendency to stay above this trend line more often than not, especially in recent memory. So I do believe that we're going to stay above it, and if we extrapolate out 1 year where this trend line is, and we look to February of 2023, then we see that it is predicting an $85,000 Bitcoin as the floor. This is just another reason why I believe a bull market is still in play and why I still believe we're going to $100,000 in the year of 2022, moving on into 2023. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Is this a trend line that you are following? Were you aware of this trend line? And do you believe that it's going to provide strong support and foundations for a major rally moving on into the rest of this year? If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tell 10 of your friends, because I believe we are the #1 technical analysis channel on YouTube. I've been doing TA on this channel for almost 5 years, and I would love for you to learn how to do TA. If you haven't already signed up for the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy, you absolutely should. Again, if you want to see what other people are thinking, go check out our Google reviews. We have 67 of them, and they are all glowing. So make sure you sign up so you can learn everything from VPVR to TD sequential, stock to flow, hash ribbons, historical analysis, and everything else that you need to know to become a professional technical analyst. Before I go, though, guys, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, you should definitely consider subscribing, because we're trying to help you become financially free in these cryptocurrency markets. And also, consider following us on Twitter @CryptoJeb for more updates on the price of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Peace.